And welcome everybody to the Dragon's Lair on Renegade Broadcasting, the best source for factual information on the planet. Well, I'm filling in for Lough's slot tonight as he has some things he needs to take care of. And so I thought I would just go ahead and do a special edition of the Dragon's Lair. And again, I'm not doing Lough's show. This is the Dragon's Lair, just his slot. And also, by the way, I will still be doing my Sunday show, so stay tuned for that. Tonight's show is going to be called Albert Pike, and it will be about discussing some things about him that really need to be discussed. There's just a whole lot of misinformation about this man out there. Now, I will say this. There's a lot of things about Pike that can be discussed. You know, there's the KKK, there's the direct involvement in Freemasonry, there's the issue of the war of northern aggression and his role as a general, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is not going to be my only show about Albert Pike. However, I'm straightening out some issues tonight, and hopefully everybody will be looking a different direction when it comes to this man in the future. Now, another thing I want to mention, I have a personal Blog Talk Radio account myself, and it has the same name as what my show is here. Now, tomorrow night, same time as tonight, I'm going to be doing a broadcast, and it's going to be about the media ignored white genocide in South Africa. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be playing two interviews of Jan Leprecht by another person on another network, who I will not name, and it will be commercial free, and it is in 5 segments. Now, 3 of those segments are available on YouTube. 2 of them are not. 2 of them I was able to get downloaded from a website shortly after the original appearance on that particular show. Now, these are some very important issues, and if you want to get up to speed on that, you really need to listen in. I consider this to be a very important issue, and we need to start putting this up near the top because it's direct genocide of our people, and it's not getting reported over here whatsoever. And I will go ahead and post this link for that in the chat room here. Now, before we get started, I want to go ahead and mention that we've got other hosts here that we need to listen to. Covers a whole span of different issues. We have Kyle on Mondays, to be determined, and/or a wild card Tuesdays with a guest host, or possibly one of the regular hosts filling in. Will on Wednesdays, Mike on Thursdays, and Lou on Fridays. We have the round table on Saturdays, and me, of course, on Sundays. Now, let me go over to the chat room and paste this link. Simulcast the show, Kyle? Well, possible. If you want that other person to be heard on this network, that's up to you. Okay, let me go back to the studio page and back to my notes. Now, today is March 15th, 2013, on our screwed up Christian calendar. Today the sun is at 24 degrees Pisces. Mercury is still retrograde. Mercury will be retrograde until this Sunday. It goes direct. It'll take a few days for it to straighten out, but again, we're still subject to some delays, general confusion, and communication issues. Additionally, for me, I still have a transiting solar arc Mars conjuncting my natal ascendant, which again represents a new beginning, and that will be going on for a few weeks. I will explain what a solar arc transit is in the very near future. And I'm also at the very beginning of a solar arc transit of Saturn conjuncting my natal descendant, which is opposite the ascendant, which is on the 7th house cusp. Again, I intend to do the show that I wanted to do on astrology in the very near future. I'm not sure what day just yet. I still have to wrap up the Martin Luther King issues. Now, I'm going to go ahead and post into the chat room another link here. and this is for quantum astrology. And hopefully that link is still good. We'll see. So, anyway, again, I will not be monitoring the chat as usual. There's just too hard to do. I'll glance at it during music breaks. And again, I'll be drinking my water and smoking my filtered cigars where I'm sitting. So you'll have to deal with that occasionally. Now we have a chat room over at www.renegade.broadcasting.com. I don't know if there's a live feed there or not. If there is, you can listen there, get better quality than Blog Talk. You can also go to www.renegadebroadcasting.chatango.com. And then we have a social network that Kyle put together called AlternativeSocial.com. There's a chat there. Same chat. All three different pages. And over there, if you're not a member of Alternative Social, what's wrong? Why haven't you gone over there and become a member? What's holding you back? Another thing I want to mention is another website is www.nationalprotectionism.com. Please go there frequently. Become active. Now, again, I have no personal website or blog. Again, I don't know if I did, I'd have a life. There will be no shows. No shows. I don't know why I keep saying that. No phone calls for now. Way too much material to cover. If you want to contact me, you can reach me at magus_18@geocities.com. So magus_18 at geocities.com. Just put subscribe in the subject if you want to join my e-list, or just write me. I can't guarantee I can get to all of your emails. Now, the cat is getting better, but she's still not next to me. However, she has a lot more life in her. Okay, again, I still need to get somebody some information. You know who you are. I'll get to it. Now, before we get started tonight, let me say this. This was a sort of a spur-of-the-moment deal, and I've had some stuff in my head about doing this show on Albert Pike for a while now, but it was not fully organized. I've kind of thrown this together, and as I said earlier, this is not going to be a complete show on Albert Pike. We're just going to straighten out mainly some issues in particular. And then once we get those straightened out, hopefully we'll all be going the correct direction. Now, before I do that, I want to go ahead and play something that I've been wanting to play for a while. And it's going to be somewhat of a little bit of a surprise. And it's going to be 20 minutes long. Now, I need to fill you in on a couple of things before I play this. And I know I do have my reasons for playing it, and you will understand after you hear it. And it has nothing to do with anything to do with this show tonight, but this is a good opportunity for me to play it, because this is not my regular slot, and so it's a fill-in slot, and I think everybody will gain something from it, and at the very least enjoy it. Now, what I'm going to play is the audio to a television show, normally 30 minutes long, but it has no commercials. It goes pretty smooth. You can understand everything that's going on by simply listening to the audio. The only thing I need to do, perhaps, just to make some clarifications, is just let you know that there is a dream scene in here where someone is dreaming, and the people involved in their dream is Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and former football coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Tom Landry. And there's a chase scene. You'll hear tires squealing on the pavement, and there's this usual feel-good scene where there's just, a brief period of music, and you'll just be able to picture in your mind what's going on. So anyway, this is a version of King of the Hill. So let's get right to it, and then after that, I'll get into Albert Pike.
Happy, 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 happy sugar birthday! Yay!
Oh, Luann, this is the best half birthday ever.
Wait, it's not even your real birthday?
My people die young, Uncle Hank. I got to get in all the celebrating I can.
You guys gonna love this place. It's town home.
Yes. Since you gentlemen came all the way from New York to discuss business, I thought you might enjoy some authentic Texas barbecue.
Yeah, we figure you come to the zoo, you want to see the animals.
Hush puppies, double shortening biscuits, batter fries? Not exactly health food.
Yeah, do they fry everything down here? Oh, wait, I don't see a no trans fat sticker on this menu.
Do you people actually still use trans fats? Most cosmopolitan cities in America have banned those, even Philadelphia.
Yeah, I bet they still have an operator. Hello, I'd like to place a call to Hillbilly 77803.
This is Nancy Hicks Gribble. Is Arlen too fat? Local civic leader Ted Wasonasong thinks so, and this tastefully cropped video is a shocking wake-up call.
That is why I am bringing a bill to the city council to ban the sale of food cooked in trans fat.
What?
This is outrageous. What's a trans fat?
It's what people put in food to make it delicious.
But I love delicious food. And you have to stop them.
Oh, I intend to. Don't worry, Bobby. We will eat potato chip chicken again.
New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Arlen. What do these cities have in common? Right now, nothing. But they could share a future free from diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. It is just this easy.
Excuse me, Hank Hill.
We know who you are.
The last thing Arlen needs is a food ban.
Are you saying you are for childhood obesity?
No, of course not.
I'll have you know my son is obese.
Calm down. I'm not saying trans fats are good for you, but banning them isn't going to solve all those problems.
Tell that to that guy's poor, pathetic fat kid.
The government should not be deciding what we have the right to eat. Besides, all sorts of foods can make you sick. Rare burgers, raw oysters. If you ban trans fats, you might as well ban that stuff, too.
Fantastic idea. Let's ban raw oysters and rare burgers, too.
No, that's not what I'm trying
All
to...
in favor? Aye.
Super. This food ban is asinine.
I wish the government would just ban itself. Wrap your head around that, fellas.
I'm just glad the government is keeping me safe. Now I can snack my way to a healthier me. Delicious and no trans fats.
Bill, we've been down this road before.
Mm-hmm. Sugar-free. Light beer. 40-30-30. You don't have to worry about me anymore, Hank. The government is doing that now. Well, they did it. They killed Sugarfoots.
What?
Those food bans put us right out of business. Turns out those trans fats were in everything we served. Even the mints.
You can't close Sugarfoots. It's an Arlen institution. Where are we going to celebrate our birthdays and sports victories?
I don't know what else to do. I guess I could turn it into a salad joint, but sooner or later, someone will use a spinach field as a toilet, and I'll be back in the same boat.
Where am I going to go for my biscuits, honey? Or my corn fritters? I'd pay anything for one last piece of Sugarfoot's fried chicken.
Anything?
This is wrong, Mr. Strickland. You're the greatest American I know. If anyone can fix this, you can.
You're right, Hank. I'm going to mull this over and see if I can come up with a solution.
Mr. Strickland is mulling it over. What the...
Hey, nice ride, Mr. Strickland.
I did it. I solved our problem.
You bought a lunch truck?
And I rehired my crew from Sugarfoots.
Now we can sell whatever kind of food we want. We in the illegal food business.
I'm not sure that's a good idea.
It's a great idea. I'll be just like Joe Kennedy running whiskey and prohibition, which helped him become the father of a president.
Well, I like the sound of that, but you could get in a lot of trouble.
You said the food bans were un-American. What's more American than breaking an unjust law? This is a fight for freedom, old top.
I'll do it. For America.
Donuts were one of my little joys. If the government takes away puppy breath and really good yawns, I'll have nothing left to live for.
I might be late getting home from work, Peggy. Buck has me working on a side project that's not technically legal.
Go on.
Well, I'm driving a lunch truck, and we're going to sell all that stuff that the city banned.
So you'll be a criminal, and I'll be the wife of a criminal.
Well, I guess, technically, but,
And all the while, we'll be living a typical suburban life. It's just like the Sopranos commercials.
it's not like that at all. I'm trying to change the law.
Of course you are, and good luck with that. You have a strong brow, Hank. I don't say that enough.
Just a couple minutes before we open. I think we're going to change a lot of minds today.
Elvin, how those biscuits coming along?
They're getting golden brown.
They're just about done, Mr. Buck. I give them the poke test.
Hold on. Okay, everybody stop what you're doing and gather around. Now, we're doing something important here. This truck is a lone voice crying out that the hard-working people of Arlen should be able to eat whatever they want. Our cause is righteous, but people are going to look for ways to demonize us. That's why we have to do things right. We have to be cleaner and safer than the rest. We have to refrigerate food when not preparing it and wash our hands often. Now let's put on our hairnets and paper hats and go out and sell some freedom. What can I get you, sir?
Burger.
And how'd you like that cooked?
I got a choice?
Well, you do here, friend.
Hey, they got all the banned food in there. That's right. Remember to tell your friend about us. Sugarfoot's Express. The food you want at a price that reflects the risk involved.
Who's next? Order up. Rare.
Mr. Hank, you best come on up here.
Hello, officer.
I heard you've got some interesting food here. Thought I'd better come down and take a look.
We're glad you did. We got fried chicken, fried okra, and a special side salad for our boys in blue. Albert, one bag of side salad for Arlen's finest with, how about, a 200 island dressing. You better make that 300 islands.
Yummy.
Well, how about that? The cops are on our side. We must be making a difference.
Oh, thank God Sir Burger stopped using trans fats. These fries really help me get through my energy crashes. I've been having a lot of those lately.
I can't take it. I'm dying for a raw oyster. I never liked them before, but now that they're contraband, I must have them.
Can you guys keep a secret?
You bet.
Mostly.
Buck and I have a truck that serves all the banned food.
The secret lunch truck? Nancy's been trying to get that on camera. I gotta go tell her.
That's why I swore you to secrecy, Dale.
They banned that food to save us. Think about it, Hank. If the government isn't deciding what we can and can't eat, who will, huh? Who? I need a nap.
Yes?
I have an anonymous tip for Nancy Hicks Gribble.
What is it, Bill?
Well, I'll be damned. I didn't even know you could fry a pickle. Ted? But the food bans were your idea.
A contradiction on the surface, but unlike many, I have the discipline to enjoy these indulgences.
That's right, Hank Hill. Ted was on us on better than you.
Perhaps it is education, perhaps breeding. The debate rages on.
Oh, no, Hank. We got company.
The news.
Let's bug out.
You heard Mr. Strickland. This is not another drill. Let's go.
Get rid of the evidence.
Okay, honey.
Peter!
Got it.
It's already yellow. We'll never make it.
When it's either that or toss out Little John, do it, Hank.
I ran a red light.
Hey, fellas. Fancy driving.
He saw us? Why didn't he give us a ticket?
Because he believes in our cause. He's a fellow freedom fighter.
But what does that have to do with reckless driving?
Plenty. Let me tell you about another reckless driver, a man named Paul Revere. You see, he had a horse that ran very... Oh, screw it, old top. We're bribing the cops to stay in business.
He's on the take?
Mr. Buck, we need to stop by the green grocer and withdraw more salad.
Relax, he knows.
Dirty cops, too? You are walking a razor's edge, Hank. Now whisper it again about the cops.
Hey, guys. Not a big deal, but I need you to sign us for school.
You got detention for chewing gum?
You can't serve kids Frito pies for lunch and not expect them to do something about the breath issues involved.
But you know chewing gum is against the rules.
It's an unjust rule. I'm fighting for what I believe in, Dad.
What's happening?
We're liberating Europe from the Nazis, Hank.
Tom Landry?
That's right. Before I won 2 Super Bowls, Hank, I flew a B-17 in World War II.
Everyone knows that.
I wanted to talk to you about your lunch truck. So did a couple of my friends. We don't think you should be breaking the law, Hank.
What? But that's what you all did. Mr. President, you were a loyal British subject until they pushed you too far, and you suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. And Tom, you broke all the rules with your revolutionary flex defense.
You're on a slippery slope, Hank. You're ignoring posted traffic laws.
And now Bobby is chewing gum.
But I thought you'd be proud.
We're not.
Crouch, 2 o'clock high!
You think we could get mayonnaise outlawed, old top?
Mr. Strickland, what do you think Tom Landry would think of what we're doing?
Top? Well, how the hell should I know?
I can't do this anymore, sir. It just doesn't feel right.
Rooster, what's he doing with a lunch truck?
An illegal lunch truck?
It's my territory now, Strickland. I'm taking over Alden's illegal food business. You finished, Strickland?
Yeah, finished? How's this for finished?
Retaliate!
Let's get him, honey.
Who is Rooster, and why is he attacking us?
He's an old acquaintance of mine from Arkansas. 30 as the day is long.
Rooster, when I'm done with you, your nickname's gonna be Chicken!
Doubtful.
This whole thing has gotten way out of hand. I thought this truck would help, but it's making things worse. I don't think I can be a part of it.
Oh, you can't quit now, Hank. If we walk away, Arlen will be at the mercy of Rooster. You want that?
Okay, fine, I'll help. But just until we get rid of Rooster.
All right!
And then we missed the lunch rush because Rooster slashed our tires. I'm losing a turf war I don't even want to fight.
Plus, Rooster's food isn't even that good.
What? You've eaten from Rooster's truck?
Just once. Today. I had a hankering for some ceviche. Subpar.
Dang it, Dale, I'm trying to drive that guy out of town. Yeah, man, it ain't cool, man.
I'm sorry, Hank, but
You okay there, Dale?
Yes. No. Oh, God. Raw ceviche from a moving truck. What went wrong?
Well, it serves you right, Dale. Yeah, man. How about you do... oh, dang, you too?
That's what happens when you sell people poison. Luckily, I have nothing to worry about, thanks to my government-approved diet.
Bill, I didn't want to have to do this, but I think you should take a look at yourself.
Oh, thanks to Rooster, half this town is hugging their toilets.
Yeah, must be some kind of food poisoning.
I guess your constant whining about hygiene and refrigeration actually saved the papers.
I don't recall whining.
Now all we gotta do is let everybody know it was Rooster who poisoned them, and we'll get on to business. We won, old top, we won!
Well, as long as those food bans are in place, no one has won. And I'm not sure they're ever going away.
From your mouth to God's ear, Hank.
Yes?
Nancy, it's Hank Hill. I've had enough. I want out.
I think I can help, Shug.
Oh, hey, can we use your facilities? We've been peeing in Snapple bottles all week.
The only thing your god-dang bans accomplished was to drive people into the shadows to eat where they got poisoned by a criminal. Rooster and his crew don't care about food safety or hygiene. And Channel 84's Nancy Hicks Gribble can prove it. She has video evidence of Rooster's blatant disregard for maintaining a sanitary kitchen. That video includes shots of everyone who broke the law and visited Rooster's truck in the past couple days, including people we all might recognize. We could all watch the tape, or you could repeal the food bans.
I say we repeal the bans.
Yes.
Let us return the power of choice to the people of Ireland and attach a small addendum to the bill which orders the destruction of that tape. All in favor?
Aye.
You know why these hush puppies taste so good, Bobby?
Trans fats?
Because you're not breaking the rules to eat them. Right, Peggy?
Oh, yeah, rules good. Hey, bad boy, what do you say we skip out on the check, huh?
No.
How about this? We load up my purse with packets of Splenda. By the time they know what hit them, we'll be long gone.
No, but I thought you'd be proud.
We're not.
Okay, I'm back. I hope everybody enjoyed that. It covered a lot of issues on multiple levels there, and I'm not commenting on them. It's I just thought that was very interesting, and they were able to do what I thought was a pretty good job considering the type of show that it is. But anyway, again, that show was called Trans Fascism. So if you ever want to look that up, you might be able to catch that on YouTube or one of the other websites similar to that. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive into tonight's topic, which is Albert Pike. What I want to discuss is this. There is a lot of how should I say this? There's a lot of people out there who have the wrong impression about Albert Pike. Now, Albert Pike is presumed to be pushing this evil Freemasonry. There's this issue of homosexuality, phallic worship, this issue of semen worship or sexual fluids, whatever the case may be. And there's also this issue of, is he a Satanist? And so on and so forth. And of course, if you've been following any of my presentations, I've stated that at some point I would be covering Freemasonry, and I will. However, I will say this at this point. Albert Pike came in at a point when a new type of Freemasonry was created called the Scottish Rite. I don't remember exactly what year it was. Maybe it was 1840, something like that. So it was not around at the time of the American Revolution. Now, on one of Star Theory radio's shows, Kyle interviewed me regarding Satanism. And there was a topic that was brought up at the time about Freemasonry. And I had given you a quote out of a book that was written about the time of the American Revolution or shortly thereafter that indicated that Freemasonry had at that point been infiltrated, and from then on was going to be pushing Judaism. And that's pretty much true. However, I won't go into this too deeply, we have the Scottish Rite Freemasonry that Albert Pike was involved with. And he was the head of the Southern jurisdiction, or he was made head of the Southern jurisdiction. And I'm not going to cover Freemasonry specifically tonight. What I want to do is, however, is to cover just enough of it so that people understand that nothing in what has been written can truly demonstrate that he was a homosexual in any way. Now, if the man was, there's absolutely no evidence of it. Okay? And what most people are going by are Christian writings, and there's this issue. And I've made fun of the so-called truther movement and the patriotard movement in the past, because it goes like this. Well, so-and-so said, and, so-and-so said, and, hey, there's this other so-and-so, and he said, and there's someone else that's so-and-so, and they have an internet radio show, and this is what they said. And so, everybody's saying it, so it must be true. Well, has anybody truly looked it up? And if they did they discover that what they found was a Christian behind the writings? In most cases, yeah. Or did you perhaps go to one of these ridiculous websites like what's that called? Let me see if I can find my tab here with that on it. Above Top Secret, or one of these other ones, Henry Makow. Oh boy, he's just really knowledgeable. He's a Jew, by the way, claims to have converted to Christianity, but he has this piece about Pike being a homosexual, and he's either a shill or a useful idiot, or he's just outright there's someone just put there to put out disinformation. I mean, it's just all bullshit. Now, I want to say this. If you've been around long enough, then you know who Bill Cooper is. Bill Cooper used to say all the time, do not take my word for it. Look it up. And I want everybody to apply that to anything that I say as well. I want you to do your own homework. In fact, you're better for it. And on top of that, I may miss something. Maybe something I say is old information. I don't always keep track of the latest stuff. Maybe my memory is faulty. A lot of this stuff I've been involved with for a long time. I've probably forgotten more than I know. And also too, I hear these conversations among you young people about this topic, that topic, and all that. God damn it, I talked about that shit 15 years ago. I'm tired of talking about it. I don't care to join in on a lot of these topics. You young people, hash it out yourselves. You need to. It's good exercise. Okay? So, anyway, my point being is this. Did you try to find somebody who was knowledgeable about the occult before you made your assessment? Or did you hear it on some idiot show on another network that I'm hearing is not doing too well right now? And, of course, doesn't seem to me that he's done his homework either. Or he is purposefully putting out disinformation. Take your pick. Whatever the case may be. Now, what I want to discuss here in particular is references to phallic worship and sexual fluids and what does he say in Morals and Dogma related to that sort of thing, etc. Now, there's a website and it's called abbreviated HOME. And it has something to do with exposing all of the homosexual agendas that are going on. And in fact, the website is HOME60515.com. And I'm at the webpage Freemasonry's Connection to the Homosexual Movement. And, I could sit here and read all of this stuff, but I'm not. I'm just going to try to read a little bit about this stuff because I've got something else that I'm going to read to you that's probably more important, and it says a lot more about the man. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about Albert Pike so you have some kind of a general idea about him. He was born in Massachusetts, and then he went to Arkansas when he got older, and he practiced law there, and he had done some exploring, and he literally walked back like 1,000 miles back home. I don't know why he didn't have a horse. But he was also involved with the Confederacy. He was made a general. And if you've listened to anything that I've discussed in the past, you'll know that the 5 civilized tribes who were then located in Oklahoma also seceded from the Union along with the rest of the South. And they even have documents to prove that. Well, Albert Pike was a general, and he was put in charge of the Indians to fight the North, and this was all in Arkansas. And during the course of the war, they didn't do so well. Indians had a lot of problems adapting to the white man's methods of fighting each other, and so a lot of them, they didn't. I don't really think they won any battles. However, there were some incidents where some accusations came up that maybe somebody had been scalped or some sort of depredations involved, and obviously this would be against Union troops. And the Confederacy issued a warrant for his arrest, and he fled and resigned his commission, and he fled to a little town in Texas, just north of where I'm at, by about probably 75 miles just northeast of me, called Warren, Texas. Well, he was discovered there, and then he was brought back, and then there was an investigation, and there was found that the claims to be wanting, he was let go, and then the Confederacy lost the war, and then he wound up going to Canada. And then when it seemed like, I don't remember the details, but he came back after either he was pardoned or it was determined it was safe to come back because nobody was going to be charged with any crimes except for Jefferson Davis. And, of course, that was a big sham because they wound up letting him go because they knew they couldn't win the case against him. And so, also, too, before the war got started, Albert Pike had written a letter. What had happened was that, and I won't get into all the details of this with what started the war, but it was pretty clear based upon Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address that there was going to be a war, and the lower 7 states of the Confederacy left the Union. And shortly after they did, Albert Pike wrote a letter stating that in order to avoid war, he thought that it might be a good idea for the upper South, the remaining 6 states, or actually 8 states if you count Kentucky and Missouri, and well, he probably was actually implying also Maryland and Delaware that were also slave states, but again, Lincoln arrested the whole government of Maryland, and they were never able to even discuss it, and somehow he halted it in Delaware. And Kentucky, I think they were able to actually secede, but they were quickly taken over, and something similar happened in Missouri, and then the Missouri government moved to Marshall, Texas. So anyway, the upper 7 states did secede from the Union, and that was to be done as a show of force against the North, to where it would be like equal. And it's like, okay, well, this is not a good idea. It's just going to be a waste. And they did wind up seceding from the Union, but not till Lincoln actually sent orders for troops. So anyway, I got a cough here for a second. Okay, I'm back. So anyway, he played some vital roles in our history in different aspects. I think after the war, he was made Grand Master of the Southern Jurisdiction, which at that time was in Charleston, South Carolina, and then they think present day it's actually in Washington, D.C. And so anyway, there's references in his book on Freemasonry that he wrote. I think it was in copyright 1871, and it brought up the issue of the phallus, and then it also brought up the issue, I believe, of sexual fluids. And if you listened to my show a couple of weeks ago, I was discussing the Norse religion, and I'd mentioned in that show that the person who wrote this essay had quoted Albert Pike on some issues. And it was discussed how the phallus is symbolic of the Irminsul. They're one and the same. And it represents the spinal column or the world column that the Kundalini goes up. Okay? So this is an allegory. Okay? And so if that's an allegory, then you need to apply that to the rest of the story. Okay? You know, I mentioned in there that that the phallus was considered sacred. It represents the risen serpent. Okay? Now, a lot of the occult has to do with, say, either ancestor worship or reproduction. Well, why would reproduction be part of the occult? Well, I can't think of anything else more godlike than creating another person. When you have children, what are you doing? You're playing God. And so, therefore, your phallus is divine, is it not? If you have a man and a woman and you don't have a penis, you ain't having sex, are you? Okay, so you get the point here. It's really pretty simple when it ultimately gets down to it. But there's stuff like this website here that, let's see, it says, now to direct our attention to the connection between Masonry and homosexuality. Are Masons using their power and influence to try to spread homosexual values? In the following enigmatic words, Pike seems to be saying that Masons engage in homosexual oral sex. He states that an initiate commemorates in sacramental observance this mysterious passion, and while partaking of the raw flesh of the victim, seems to be invigorated by a fresh draught from the fountain of universal life, hence the significance of the phallus. As is his wont, Pike does not explain these words. Okay, well, I'm going to interject something here. Why the hell would he need to? He's talking to Masons who are already aware of what the hell's going on. Okay, the book at the time was probably never intended for the public to read. You know, it's only been in recent times that most of what is involved in Masonry has been exposed for the world to see. So therefore, he's not going to explain it. He does not need to explain it, because in order to get to that degree, you will have already known what he is talking about. Now, of course, the dumbass Christians don't know this. And, of course, what bugs the hell out of me is how the non-Christians just sit there and accept all this without bothering to investigate themselves. Now, whether or not you find out the truth or not is one thing, but going around parroting something just because Christians are parroting it, well, that's fucking stupid. And if you're doing that, pull your head out of your ass, okay? And I don't care who I just insulted when I said that, because it's time everybody gets their head out of their ass in this movement and everybody figures out what the hell is going on. And if you think, well, I don't really care for spirituality, well, whatever. You don't want to get involved in it, don't get in it, but recognize it, okay? Christianity has got to go. Islam, got to go. Judaism, got to go. What does that leave? Spirituality. Okay. So anyway, as is wont, Pike does not explain these words. For example, he does not spell out what he means by this mysterious passion. But elsewhere in the book, he twice notes that phallic worship is part of the ancient mysteries. Oh, really? Not only does homosexual sex apparently play a role in Masonry, but homosexual orgies evidently do too. Another Christian perspective here. Pike, speaking in general of a newly initiated member, says he mingles with the crowd of initiates and, crowned with feathers, celebrates with them the holy orgies. Crowned with feathers. What does that mean? The magnum opus, the risen serpent, the crown chakra. When you see an Indian in a full headdress, what do you think that is? Okay. Holy orgies. Well, an orgy is not necessarily sex. I can have a huge spread of food in front of me and call that an orgy, right? Okay, there you have it. So, anyway, let's see here. Pike, speaking in general of a newly initiated member, says, okay, I just read that. A noteworthy character, can't talk tonight. A noteworthy characteristic shared by Masonry and the homosexual movement, which points to a possible connection between the two, is the prevalence of sexist attitudes among the members of both groups. Okay, well, I think I could say that about Christianity, considering that Paul was a misogynist. Okay. Anyway, he's got in parentheses here, it says, it is understandable that homosexuals can develop negative feelings for the opposite sex because every time a, say, male homosexual sees a woman, he is reminded of his abnormality and of his impotence with women, of his heterophobia. Moreover, if, say, a male homosexual lets himself have warm feelings for a woman, he may begin to wonder about his sexual identity. Brackets. One homosexual author, Dennis Altman, admits, undoubtedly for many homosexuals there is something threatening in the idea of intimacy with the other sex. Close brackets. Yes, that is true. That does not apply to this because this has nothing to do with homosexuality. So there we go, trying to link things that are actually unassociative to begin with. And then he says also homosexuals clearly have little use for the opposite sex, generally speaking. Duh. Okay. For all those reasons, we should not be surprised to find sexist attitudes rampant amongst homosexuals. And indeed, we do find that. Though this fact is studiously ignored or censored by the dominant pro-homosexual biased liberal media. Yeah. Various lesbian and male homosexual authors have drawn attention to that sexism. Lesbians, authors, etc., so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Plus male homosexual authors, so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. Okay. Now, to return to Masonry. It says, now to return to Masonry, which we shall keep in mind is an all-male group. Pike provides serious evidence of organizational sexism in Masonry via these words. The love of woman cannot die out, and it has a terrible and uncontrollable fate. As usual, he does not explain what he means by this startling statement, but the heterophobic meaning seems obvious enough. Elsewhere, he stated that Christianity gave to woman her proper rank and influence. It has regulated domestic life. Well, okay. So anyway, in some circles it is common opinion, misguided or not, that Christianity, especially Catholicism, places women at a lower rank than men because women cannot become priests or bishops or cardinals or popes, and because wives are supposed to be submissive or subordinate to their husbands, generally speaking. In sum, While Pike does not explicitly declare that women are inferior to men or that they are unworthy of love, he does seem to strongly hint at that, just like he strongly hints at other things. Freemasonry is still a force in America and the world. The fact that this group is evidently biased against women who cannot join, but yeah, they do have their own thing, something another Eastern Star, and biased in favor of homosexual relationships should not go unmentioned. Again, like he knows what the fuck he's talking about. And neither should the very possibility that this group is using its influence to try to impose pro-homosexual values on the public. Well, geez, I guess Major League Baseball is hates women because, my God, they don't have any pro-women football players, do they? Let's see, not in the male league. How about basketball? Well, they have the separate female league, but they don't let the women mix in the male league, do they? And then we look at pro baseball, and don't see any women there. So I guess we can say the same thing about these other organizations, correct? How many times do men gather for subjects that they are interested amongst themselves? How many times do women gather for subjects that they are interested only in themselves, correct? Okay. So anyway, now that you have this understanding that this is an occult reference, and that this is a male organization, and that this is a reference to the Magnus Opus, and it's allegorical, now you know that what is being written has nothing to do with homosexuality. Now, there's some other issues, and this is where I'm going to go ahead and dive into this other essay. However, before I do that, and I'm going to go ahead and play one more song before I get into that, because I need to go to the restroom, and I also need to, here, hold on just one sec. Let me focus on what I'm doing here. And I need to check on the dog, and I need to give my voice a momentary rest, even though I really haven't been talking that long. So anyway, here we go. Come on. Play. All right. Hitting the button, but it won't play. Okay, I'm back. And one thing I wanted to mention, too, before I forget, the Scottish Rite was an invention of a Scotsman. This occurred in France. Ultimately, that was the source of it. And it's only called Scottish because the man who created it was Scottish. Now, what I've got here is an essay. And there's the website it came from also discusses some other issues, and it talks about Pike's statue and the 3 World Wars issue, and the letter to Mazzini and Lucifer and some other stuff. And so anyway, that 3 World Wars letter, by the way, nobody has any evidence for that. How do you create fear? Well, you say what you're going to do and put it out there in a way that people will buy it. And so let's find a scapegoat, attach it to them, and put it out there. And therefore, they're putting their agenda out there in front, right there for you to look at. And so, therefore, it looks real, doesn't it? So anyway, what I've got here is an essay it's an essay from something. I don't know what publication it is, but it has something to do with Masonry. And it's called The Builder, and this is from May 1915, and it's called The Philosophy of Masonry, and it is basically from Albert Pike's perspective. Now, one more thing before I get started, I almost forgot. I'm not going to sit here and speculate whether Masons are useful idiots to people. Generally, I think most of them are not, and I think most of them are just involved in this for social advancement in some way. And I think most people would probably agree to that. Now, that it could be the same thing as what I just said. Let's attach an agenda to a scapegoat. However, there was an anti-Masonic party in the United States at one point, and that would be another issue for another time, another show. And I'm sure there was very good reason at that time to create the party. Hopefully, it was not out of fear. I'm not through investigating that. So anyway, I'm going to give you the little foreword here to this. It says, Albert Pike's works are prodigious. Anti-Masons, however, fixate on one work alone. Here, less than 20 years after his death, a distinguished attorney, scholar, and Mason attempts to define and explain the philosophy of Pike. This work, published in the Masonic magazine The Builder in April 1915, is itself detailed, but it should give the more serious inquirer a wealth of information from which to determine the validity of the smears that anti-Masons make on the character and intent of this Trinitarian poet and enormously popular man of his day. Our thanks to the late brother, George Helmer, FPS, a man who treasured Masonic history and scanned thousands upon thousands of old Masonic writings to preserve them for the future. This piece was reprinted in his One More Time Please mailings. That's the name of it, One More Time Please, which were truly a treasure to read. Brother Helmer provided a great service to Freemasonry, making long-forgotten material available to current Masonic scholars. His loss at age 42 is inestimable. You are remembered, Brother Helmer. Okay, and again, this was written in 1915. Philosophy of Masonry. Lecture 4, Albert Pike. We come now to a radically different type of Masonic philosophy. To Preston, Masonry is a traditional system of knowledge, and its end is to impart knowledge. Hence, he thinks of the relation of Masonry to education. To Krauss, it is organized morals, and its end is to put organized mankind behind the universal moral ideas of humanity. Hence, he thinks the relation of Masonry to law and government. To Oliver, it is a mode of approach to God, and its end is to bring us to the absolute by means of pure tradition. Hence, he thinks of the relation of Masonry to religion. Pike gives us instead a metaphysics of Masonry. To him, Masonry is a mode of studying first principles, and its end is to reveal and to give us possession of the universal principle by which we must master the universe. Hence, he thinks of the relation of Masonry to the fundamental problems of existence. And part of this view was inevitable in one who thought and wrote in a country under the influence of the transcendental philosophy. In part this view was inevitable in one who thought and wrote in a country under the influence of the transcendental philosophy. In part, also, it was to be expected in a member of a profession whose philosophical ideals, so far as its leaders held it at all, were thoroughly Hegelian. In part, it grew out of Pike's wide reading in the philosophical writings of antiquity and his bent for mysticism. Thus, his philosophy of Masonry is a product of the man and the time, and we must look first at each of these in order to treat it intelligently. Now, again, keep in mind that, like I said before, Masonry was infiltrated with Judaism about the time of the American Revolution. However, Scottish Rite Masonry had not actually even been invented at that time. So it could not have possibly been infiltrated to any major extent at this time. There may have been some. I cannot vouch for that. I'm not a Mason either, so I'm not trying to defend any Masons. And I do know a Mason. However, he won't talk. He's faithful to his oath. So anyway, the man. Albert Pike was born in Boston, December 29th, 1809. His parents were poor. He was educated in the public schools in Boston, and it is interesting to know, as a means of comparing those days with these, that although he passed the examinations for admission to Harvard College, he was unable to enter because in those days the requirements was that 2 years tuition be paid in advance or secured by bond. He became a school teacher and taught in country schools in Massachusetts from 1825 to 1831. In 1831, he went west and joined a trading party from St. Louis to Santa Fe. Santa Fe was then in Mexico, and the journey at the time was a perilous one through a wilderness inhabited only by Indians. On his return, he traversed the Staked Plains in the Indian Territory and settled finally at Van Buren in Arkansas, where he opened a school. At that time, political feeling in Arkansas was very bitter. The territory was divided between the Conway Party, who were politically Democrats and in truth were a sort of a Klan as well, and the Crittenden Party, who were Whigs politically but were in truth more a personal faction than a political party. Bloodshed was frequent, and in many respects there was a feud between the factions, quite as much as a political rivalry. The early experience of this era of feud and private war on the frontier is worth remembering in connections with many things in Pike's lectures upon Masonry. Pike was a Whig, and as such published in the Whig organ at Little Rock some articles of such force as to attract general attention. According to Crinton, the Whig leader sought out Pike in his county schoolroom and induced him to go to Little Rock as one of the editors of the party organ. This was his opportunity, and he improved it to the full by studying law while also at work upon the paper. In 1834, he was admitted to the bar, and he rose rapidly to the first rank in the profession in Arkansas. Among his earlier achievements was the preparation of the first revision of the statutes of that state. That the book does not bear his name, but contemporary accounts tell us that he had the chief part in framing it. By general consent, it is a model of what such a work should be. At the outbreak of the Mexican War, Pike entered the service and was in action at the Battle of Buena Vista. Now we'll be discussing that one day when I get around to Texas and the Mexican War. His courage, proved already in the political conflicts of territorial days, was again shown in the events that grew out of the campaign in Mexico. Pike felt it was his duty to criticize the military conduct of General Roane, R-O-A-N-E, and as a result was compelled to fight a duel. The duel took place over the line in the Indian Territory. Happily, it was bloodless and ended in reconciliation. There is a good reason to suspect that some traces of this experience are to be seen in his lectures. From 1853 to 1857, Pike practiced law in New Orleans. Thus he was led to make a diligent and characteristically thorough study of Roman law, the basis of the French law, which obtained then, as it does now, in Louisiana. And by the way, if you're not aware, Louisiana is the only state in the country that actually operates under something other than basically common law. It's really French civil code mixed in with some Roman law and common law, whereas most of the states in the Union are common law mixtures with Roman. In 1857, he returned to Arkansas and afterwards set up the Supreme Bench of that state. At the outbreak of the Civil War, he cast his lot with the South. As he had great influence with the Indians, he was sent to raise a force in the Indian Territory. In this work, he was vigorous and untiring, but his utmost efforts could not make obedient or efficient soldiers out of the large force which he was able to raise. Some of the doings of this force have left a stain upon his memory, which, according to the best authorities obtainable, seem to be undeserved. In truth, his experience was not very different from that of the British officers during the Revolution and during the War of 1812, who sought to make military use of Indian allies. In any event, the project failed. This experiment has also left more than one trace in his Masonic lectures. After the Civil War, he practiced law for a time in Memphis. In 1868, he went to Alexandria, Virginia, and in 1870 moved across the river to Washington, where he practiced law for 21 years. He died in 1891. Albert Pike was the man of the Midwest in most varied learning. He was a strong and successful common law lawyer. He had studied the Roman law to good purpose and left a manuscript of a 3-volume book upon the principles of the Roman law, which is now in the library of the Supreme Court of the United States. But he had many scholarly interests outside of his profession. Now listen carefully to what I'm fixing to tell you. He left among his papers a manuscript translation of the Zend Avesta and of the Rig Veda in 22 large volumes, copiously annotated. Now, if you don't know what those are ancient Aryan texts. That has not a goddamn thing to do with fucking Judaism. All right? So let's get that through your thick heads. All right? Okay. Moreover, he and by the way, before I go any further, time permitting, I'll cover a little bit of that just so you know what those are. Moreover, he made some mark as a poet. Some of his poems, particularly a striking one upon the Battle of Buena Vista, are still to be found in school readings, and his verses were formerly much in vogue. Reviewing his extra Masonic record for a moment, we see a man born and educated in New England, a pioneer in the Southwest in its frontier period, a soldier in 2 wars, a successful lawyer under each of the 2 great systems of modern law, For a seasoned judge of the Supreme Court, and withal, though largely self-educated, a man of learning and culture who, along with the treatise upon the principles of Roman law, which bore immediately upon his profession, could write verse of some merit, and could busy himself in the translation of the great books of Oriental philosophy and religion. But the field of Pike's most fruitful labors was masonry. His career as a Mason is too recent, 1915, and his standing as a Masonic scholar is too well known to all of you to call for any statement in this place. But I may remind you that he became Sovereign Grand Commander of the Southern Jurisdiction in the Scottish Rite in 1859, and devoted the remaining 32 years of his life in continually increasing measure to the work of that rite. Excepting Krauss, who I mentioned earlier, no mind of equal caliber has been employed upon the problems of Masonry. And Krauss, the great scholar and philosopher as he was, had lived only in the cultured serenity of German university towns, whereas Pike had lived in Boston, in turbulent territorial Arkansas, and had been compelled by local public opinion to fight in a duel, had fought in 2 wars, and had commanded Indians. Moreover, Krauss's Masonic experience was negligible in comparison with that of the veteran of American Masonry. Accordingly, we need not hesitate to pronounce Albert Pike by far the best qualified by nature, experience of life, Masonic experience, and Masonic learning of those who have thought upon the problems of Masonic philosophy. Okay, the next section. Now is to the time. In the early part of his career, Pike brought into contact with the 18th century political philosophy, which became classical in American political thought because it was the philosophy of the framers of our constitutions and bills of rights, and entered into the framework of our institutions in their formative period. Also in this part of his career, in his study of law, he came in contact with the 18th century legal philosophy of the American common law lawyer. In the latter part of his career, in his wide philosophical studies, he was brought into contact with the prevailing metaphysical method of the 19th century with the conception of the absolute, which governed in English philosophical writing, and with the method of unifying all things by reference to some basic absolute principle which prevailed down to the new century. This same period saw the general rise of materialism in the wake of decay of dogma and the triumphant advance of the natural sciences. And this movement so far affected his thought as to turn him, by way of reaction, to mysticism. Indeed, a mystic element is to be found, not uncommonly, in thoroughgoing idealists. For example, the leader of the new school that builds on Hegel's philosophy had been reproved for dragging mysticism into so prosaic a subject as the philosophy of law. But mystics are made by nature, and nature made Pike one of the greatest of them. Hence, we may be confident that reaction from materialism merely accentuated an element which in any event would have been prominent in his thinking and writing. Each of the 4 points of contact with American thought in the 19th century requires a moment's consideration. American political philosophy in the first half of the 19th century was a compound of English law and French speculation. Prior to the Revolution, in the Declaration of Rights of the Continental Congress, the colonists had relied upon the common law rights of Englishmen as asserted by English lawyers and English judges against the Stuart kings in the 17th century. But the Declaration of Independence relied instead upon the natural rights of man, a supposed body of universal, eternal, inalienable rights deduced by reason from the nature of man in the abstract. I need to cough. Hold on. Under the influence of English thinkers of the 17th century and the continental philosophy of law in the period after Grotius, I think I said that right, the French writers of the 18th century had developed this theory of natural rights to a high degree, and the founders of our government were deeply read in their writings, but they were also deeply read in Blackstone and in Coke, the oracle of English law. Naturally, they combined the general theory of the French speculators in the concrete details of the English lawyers and came to hold that the common law rights of Englishmen found in their law books were the natural rights of man found in the French political philosophy. Hence, in our Bill of Rights, they laid down the former section by section and enacted them in fixed and precise rules on the authority of the latter. This had important consequences for the American legal philosophy, which Pike absorbed in the formative period of his study for the bar. In the contest between the English judges and the Stuart Kings, In the contest between the English judges and the Stuart Kings, the judges had claimed to stand between the rights and liberties of the individual Englishman and arbitrary oppressive action on the part of the Crown. When we took over the theory of eternal, inalienable natural rights and combined it with the theory of the English lawyers, the result was a doctrine that law stands and must stand between the individual on the one hand and state and society on the other hand, and that its function is to secure the individual in his natural rights against the aggressions and oppressions of organized society. And actually, I kind of find that interesting how that ties into what I played earlier for the King of the Hill. This idea of mediating function of law as a reconciling of the individual and the whole, which the lawyer of the last century took for the first article of his creed, is to be seen throughout Pike's lectures and lends itself readily to his generalization of equilibrium or balance as the ultimate reality. For if a law was a mediation, a harmonizing or reconciling, and the universe was governed by law, the fundamental principle of the universe was a mediating or harmonizing, which he called equilibrium. When in his later studies Pike came upon the metaphysical methods of the 19th century philosophers, it was easy to confirm the views to which his acquaintance with the classical American political and legal philosophy in his reading of French Masonic writers of the 18th century had led him. For the generation that followed, Hegel sought to explain the universe as the realization of an idea. History was the unfolding of that idea in human experience. Philosophy was a logical unfolding of the same idea. Hence the quest was for the one fundamental idea of which the seemingly complex order of the phenomenal world was but a manifestation. Hence the task of the philosopher was to unite and reconcile all differences in the absolute, which he reached through his idea. Traces of the transition from the legal and political analogy to this metaphysical foundation may be seen here, and there are those parts of Morals and Dogma, the book he wrote in 1871, or published in 1871, which we may suspect remained in the earlier forms despite his repeated and thorough-going revisions. Let me reread that, and let me cough. Traces of the transition from the legal and political analogy to this metaphysical foundation may be seen here and there in those parts of Morals and Dogma which we may suspect remained in their earlier forms despite his repeated thoroughgoing revisions. Yes, that's correct. Thoroughgoing, that's what he wrote. In his later studies, Pike was also compelled to take account of the materialism which held its head so high and with a mouth speaking great things, grew so confidently dogmatic during the last third of his life. If Pike was naturally a mystic, seemed sometimes to rely on intuition more than on reason, to put faith, which is self-justifying, at the bottom of knowledge, to find a reality in the occult, and to show a conviction of the relation of the symbol to the thing symbolized, in contrast with the rigorous metaphysic of the lectures where he argues and demonstrates instead of prophesizing, we must consider the impatience of an idealist and a mystic with the mechanical universe of the positivist and the economic ethics and belly philosophy of the materialist, which a new generation was asserting all about him. Let me take a drink of water here. Okay, now let's turn to Pike's Masonic philosophy. Pike did not leave us any compendium of his philosophical views. Hence, we cannot, in the case of Oliver, who I mentioned earlier, apprehend them at a glance from a concise exposition. The study of Pike's Masonic philosophy must read and study the teeming pages. One must read and study the teeming pages of Morals and Dogma. After reading and reflection, the system of philosophy expounded will make itself felt, but it is quite impossible for the reader to put his finger upon this sentence or that and say, here is Pike's philosophy in a nutshell. For the first thing to bear in mind in reading Morals and Dogma is that we must discriminate closely between what is really Pike and what is not. Indeed, he has told us this himself. Quote, in preparing this work, the Grand Commander has been about equally author and compiler, since he has extracted quite half of its contents from the works of the best writers and most philosophic or eloquent thinkers. Perhaps it would have been better and more acceptable if he had extracted more and written less. Still, perhaps half of it is his own, and incorporating here the thoughts and words of others, he has continually changed and added to the language, often intermingling in the same sentences his own words with theirs. In the same measure, the author is unjust to himself in this statement. In a sense, the book is all of his own. He read and digested everything. He assimilated it. He made it part of himself and worked it into his system. But for this very reason, text from Pike and excerpts from Moral and Dogma are more than usually deceptive. We may fasten almost any philosophical idea upon him if we proceed in this way. We may refute almost any page by any other page if we look simply at the surface and do not distinguish matter which he is adapting or is making use of to illustrate the development of thought upon the subject from dogmatic statements of his philosophy. Now, what was I saying earlier about understanding what he meant? Morals and Dogma must be read and interpreted as a unit. As Immanuel Kant said of his own writings, it is a book to think through, not merely to read through. These contributions of the first moment to Masonic science deserve to be noted before taking up Pike's philosophy of Masonry in detail. In the first place, Pike was the apostle of liberty of interpretation. He insisted in season and out of season that no infallible authority speaking ex cathedra could bind the individual Mason to this or that interpretation of traditional symbols of the craft. He taught that the individual Mason, instead of receiving a predigested Masonry laid out to him by another, should make his own Masonry for himself by study and reflection upon the work and the symbols. Thus he stood for thoroughgoing individual Masonic development. He stood for a Masonry built upon with each Mason by himself and for himself on the solid foundation of internal conviction. This Masonic Protestantism, so to speak, as it might well be called, is especially interesting in one who was so thoroughly filled with the French writings upon Masonry. Secondly, he gave us a genuine interpretation of the symbols which came into Masonry through the Hermetic philosophers. Okay, Hermetics is not Jewish either. I saw somebody in the chat room try to claim that Hermetics had something to do with Judaism. If there's anything in Judaism or the Kabbalah that was stolen and perverted from Egypt with Hermetics, then it was stolen and perverted. Okay? So let's get that straight as well. Hutchinson and Preston, and even Oliver in many cases, did not understand these symbols at all. Indeed, Preston was much less interested in what they really were than in how they might be made instruments of education in his time and place. Accordingly, Preston and Oliver gave currency to inadequate and often ignorant explanations of ancient symbols. Pike studied their history and development. He mastered their spirit and perceived their place in the evolution of human thinking. Hence, he was able to replace the crude symbolism of the end of the 18th century by a real science of Masonic symbols. In the third place, not only did he interpret our symbols, but he enriched the symbolism of the craft from a profound acquaintance with the ancient and modern literature of symbolism and mysticism. Thus he made us aware that the science of Masonic symbols is but part of a much wider subject that is not self-sufficient, and that the serious Masonic student has much more to study than he can find within the covers of an exclusively Masonic library. In other words, you have to take it upon yourself to learn and expand your thought from many sources. I can do no more than give you a key to what I conceive to be Pike's philosophy of Masonry. Perhaps the first point to make is that in the 19th century America, philosophy was regarded under the influence of Herbert Spencer as the unification of knowledge. Moreover, the metaphysical method of the first half of the 19th century, when Pike's ideas were formative, was to endeavor to explain everything in a speculative, metaphysical way by a spiritual, logical principle. But it so happened that all antiquity had been making a like search for that one, but for a different sort of one. The earlier Greek philosophers sought a single element to which the whole universe might be reduced. The Ionian philosophers sought to find such elements in air, fire, water, or as one of them put it, a primordial slime. Oriental thinkers had usually sought an absolute word, which was likely to be the key of all things. Others among the ancients had sought an absolute principle. With vast labor, Pike brings together all that ancient and Oriental peoples thought and wrote, and all that mystics have since thought and written, with the ideas of the Orient and of antiquity as a basis, and upon this foundation he set forth to work out a system of his own. Pike starts with the triad. This is suggested by the ancient conception of the number 3 as a symbol of completion or perfection. The singular, the dual, and the plural, the odd and the even added, was thought of as a complete system of numbers. Hence the number 3 was perfection in its simplest form. It was the type or the symbol of perfection. He finds a triad everywhere in ancient thought and in every system of the occult and in every mystic philosophy. He finds it also in all Masonic symbolism and from end to end in our lectures. Accordingly, he seeks to show that in its essentials, this triad is at times and in all its forms the same triad. Wisdom, strength, beauty, intelligence, force, harmony, reason, will, action, morals, law, social order, faith, hope, charity, equality, liberty, fraternity. All these, he shows, are the same triad in various forms. There is a fruitful passive principle which is energized and made productive by an active, creative principle, and there is a product. As he shows, Osiris, Isis, and Horus symbolize this with the Egyptians, and he traces the same reduction of the universe to these fundamental through every type of ancient mystery and all mystic speculation. In Morals and Dogma, he makes all manner of application of this idea to politics, to morals, and to religion. He carries it into every type of human spiritual activity and gives the most copious and learned illustrations. But this of itself would be barren and would end in pluralism. Accordingly, he conceives that these three things are emanations, or better, or rather are manifestations of the Absolute. This idea, again, he subjects to the test of application to all that has been thought and written by mystics down to his time. We find a unity in the Absolute, but how do we unify the manifold, the infinite manifestations of the Absolute in our experience? Is there here some one principle? Pike says there is, and that this unifying principle is equilibrium or balance. The result of this action of creative, active, energy, and productive, receptivity, is in the end a harmony, a balance, and equilibrium. He then applies this idea of equilibrium to every field of thought. One example will suffice. It is the secret of universal equilibrium, of that equilibrium in the deity, between the infinite divine wisdom and the infinite divine power, from which result the stability of the universe, the unchangeableness of the divine law, and the principles of truth, justice, and right, which are part of it. Of that equilibrium also, between the infinite divine justice and the infinite divine mercy, the result of which is the infinite divine equity and the moral harmony or beauty of the universe. By it, the endurance of created and imperfect natures in the presence of a perfect deity is made possible. Of that equilibrium between necessity and liberty, between the action of the divine omnipotence and the free will of man, by which vices and base actions and ungenerous thoughts and words are crimes and wrongs, justly punished by law of cause and consequence, through nothing in the universe can happen or be done contrary to the will of God, and without which coexistence of liberty and necessity, of free will of the creature, and omnipotence in the Creator, there could be no religion, no any law of right and wrong, or merit and demerit, nor any justice in human punishments or penal laws. Of that equilibrium between good and evil, and light and darkness in the world, which assures us that all is the work of the infinite wisdom and of infinite love, and there is no rebellious demon of evil or principle of darkness coexistent and in eternal controversy with God, or the principle of light and of good, by attaining to the knowledge of which equilibrium we can, through faith, see the existence of evil, sin, suffering, and sorrow in the world, is consistent with the infinite goodness as well as the infinite wisdom of the Almighty. Sympathy and antipathy, attraction and repulsion, each a force of nature, are contraries in the souls of men, and in the universe's spheres and worlds, and from the action and opposition of each against the other result harmony, and that movement which is in the life of the universe and the soul alike. Of that equilibrium between authority and individual action, which constitutes free government, by settling in immutable foundations, liberty with obedience to law, equality with subjection to authority, and fraternity with subordination to the wisest and the best, and of that equilibrium between the active energy of the will of the present, expressed by the vote of the people, and the passive stability and permanence of the will of the past, expressed in constitutions of government, written or unwritten, in the laws and customs, gray with age and sanctified by time, as precedence and authority. And finally, of that equilibrium possible in ourselves, in which Masonry incessantly labors to accomplish in its initiates and demands of its adepts and princesses, else unworthy of their titles, between the spirit and the divine, and the material and the human and man, between the intellect and reason and moral sense on one side, and the appetites and passions on the other, from which represent the harmony and beauty of a well-regulated life. Well, we've got our idea of equilibrium, and the profane will say, what of it? Pike would answer that this universal unifying principle is the light of which all men in all ages have been in search, the light which we seek as Masons. Hence, we get our answers to the fundamental problems of Masonic philosophy. Now, I'm going to stop and play a song. We're nearing the very end of this, and I'll be right back. Hopefully, I won't have any problems hitting the button this time. Let's see what happens, okay? Come on. Never fails. Okay. In a year now. Okay, I'm back. You know what I think I'm going to do? Has nothing to do with this show. You know, I keep having problems with these buttons. I mean, I hit in the damn dead center of these buttons to play these songs, and nothing happens. So what I think I'm going to try is I'm going to change mice. I'm going to try a different one, and we'll see if that works better in the near future. I'm using a Safari browser right at the moment. I thought I would give that a try. The one I had the most problems with when I did the astrology show was Internet Explorer. I had used it before, and it did fine. And the one after that I did with Google Chrome, but I didn't want to use Google Chrome this time because the damn Flash player crashes all the time. I mean, who needs that? I mean, the chat goes, everything goes, So Chrome can't be trusted for doing this. Well, anyway, I've got a little bit left in this, not much, and then I will move to another area that is related, that was discussed in here previously. We've got about 15 minutes roughly here. So I'll touch on this or the other subject lightly. So anyway, let's see here. There's 3 things listed at the very end of this essay. Number 1, what is the end of Masonry? What is the purpose for which it exists? Pike would answer, the immediate end is the pursuit of light. But light means here attainment of the fundamental principle of the universe in bringing ourselves into the harmony, the ultimate unity, which alone is real. Hence, the ultimate end is to lead us to the absolute, interpreted by our individual creed, if we like, but recognized as the final unity in which all things merge and with which, in the end, all things must accord. You will see here at once a purely philosophical version of what, with Oliver, was purely religious. Number 2, what is the relation of Masonry to other human institutions, and particularly to the state and to religion? He would answer it seeks to interpret them to us, make them move vital for us, to make them more efficacious for their purposes by showing the ultimate reality of which they are manifestations. It teaches us that there is but one absolute, and that everything short of that absolute is relative. It is but a manifestation. So that creeds and dogmas, political or religious, are but interpretations. It teaches us to make our own interpretation for ourselves. It teaches us to save ourselves by finding for ourselves the ultimate principle by which we shall come to the real. In other words, it is a universal institution of which spiritual, moral, and social institutions are local and temporary phases. Number 3, how does Masonry seek to reach these ends? He would say by a system of allegories and of symbols handed down from antiquity, which we are to study and upon which are to reflect until they reveal the lights to each of us individually. Masonry preserves these symbols and acts out those allegories for us. But the responsibility of reaching the real through them is upon each of us. Each of us has the duty of using this wonderful heritage from antiquity for himself. Masonry, in Pike's view, does not offer us prejudiced food. It offers us a wholesome fare which we must digest for ourselves. But what a feast! It is nothing less than the whole history of human search for reality. And through it, he conceives, through mastery of it, we shall master the universe. And that was originally published in 1915. So, anyway, there you have that. Let me clear the screen of that. And I need to cough for just a second. Now, I'm also going to take the time to light a stogie. Okay. One day I'll figure out a way to get my ashtray on the other side of this computer. Every once in a while I bump my mic with my hand when I do that. Okay, let's see here. I've got some web pages. Remember I discussed the Rig Veda and the Zenavesta? Okay. The Avesta is the primary collection of sacred texts of Zoroastrianism and is composed in the Avestan language. The texts of the Avesta, which are in the Avesta language, were composed over the course of several hundred years. The most important portion, the Gathas, in older, before the works of John so-and-so, are the hymns thought to have been composed by Zoroaster himself. The liturgical text of the Yasna, which includes the Gathas, is an older Avestan with short latter additions to the younger Avestan. The Yasna's oldest portions may be older than the Gathas, later adapted to more closely follow the doctrine of Zoroaster. Now, Zoroastrianism, by the way, if you're not aware of it, is based in Persia. It is the ancient language of the Persians. They have to be some sort of Aryans, or the land was Aryan, one of the two, because the word Iran, not Iran, Iran, okay? You know, Americans really sound disgusting when they say Iran. Well, we're going to go over there and we're going to kick Iran's ass. It's pronounced Iran. How do I know that? I know some Persians, okay? So anyway, I'm sure at some point the ancient Aryans lived in that land, and the Persians are probably some descendants of the ancient Aryans. However, their gene pool became isolated, whereas ours, just like ours, became isolated in Europe. So anyway, these are very ancient texts, and I'll read a little bit about the Zend here. It says the word Zend or Zan literally means interpretation. It refers to late Middle Persian, the late Middle Persian language, paraphrases of and commentaries on the individual Avestan books. They would be compared with the Jewish Targums. These commentaries, which date from 3rd to 10th centuries, were not intended for use as theological texts by themselves, but for religious instruction. Manuscripts of the Avesta exist in two forms. One is the Avesta o Zand, in which the individual books are written together with their Zand. The other is the Vinadad Sadeh, in which the Yasna, Visparad, and Vinadad are set out in alternating chapters in the order used to the Vinadad ceremony. So anyway, let's see here. That's really a little bit boring, but they are, just so you know, they are ancient Zoroastrian and Aryan religious texts. Now, the Rig Veda is a little bit more interesting, and I have some better information to read on that. See here, we got about 10 minutes. I'm not going to get through the whole thing, but I can knock most of it out. The Rig Veda is the most ancient religious text of Hinduism. It is generally believed to have been compiled into its present form not later than 1300 BC. It is generally thought that these verses were brought in by the Indo-Aryans who came to India in ancient times. They shared a common origin with the Iranian Aryans, worshipping the same gods as Mitra, Varuna, Indra. They also had the cult of fire worship and soma, which is an intoxicating drink, and composed the verses in various different meters. There is a striking similarity between the language of the Rig Veda and the Zoroastrian Holy Bible, the Zen Avesta. The language of the Rig Veda is very poetic and is known as Vedic Sanskrit, which differs quite a bit from the classical Sanskrit of latter times. It contains verses addressed to various deities who are personifications of the forces of nature. Many researchers believe that the verses in the Rig Veda were composed over a period of time by various clans of seers. Each seer family had a favorite meter in which they composed their hymns, although some meters were used by many different clans. It is believed that sometime around 600 BC collected these verses as Samhita texts. The compilers applied the rules of Sandhi, a process by which two words are combined together by contracting vowels or turning them into semi-vowels, sadhanama, and fixed the text in its current form. The body of hymns was translated by reciting, for there is no evidence that they preserved written records. Once the compilation was done, an ingenious device was used to preserve it as collected. Indexes called the Anukramanas were also prepared, which enumerate the number of stanzas contained in each hymn, the meter in which it is composed. The addressed deity formed a neat device for preventing distortions to the original text. This is the reason the main body of the work has been preserved so well over such a long period. The Rig Veda consists of 1,017 hymns. The total is a little over 10,000 stanzas. The hymns vary quite a bit in their length. The entire material is commonly separated into 10 mandalas or books. Each book consists of many suktas or hymns. This is the preferred method when quoting from the Rig Veda. Books 2 through 7 contain hymns that were, according to the tradition, revealed to the seers of the time, the seers of the same family, revealed to the seers of the same family, and the evidence for this view is that the name of the family occurs many times in the hymns. A typical example will be to say, and this was seen by Anagrasa. It is generally believed that books 1, 8, and 10 are a collection of hymns composed by different families. Book 9 has been composed by taking all of the verses that were originally addressed to Soma, to be chanted while the Soma juice was clarifying, and putting them in a single book. Possibly this division was made so that these verses could be chanted in the ritual purification of the Soma juice. It is also believed that Book 10 was a later addition, as the hymns in this book refer to the ideas represented in the previous books. Linguistic analysis also supports this theory. The gods that appear in the Rig Veda are personifications of the powers of nature. The hymns mostly invoke the protection of the gods for various activities, such as protection from harm and war, protection from drought, boon for increased wealth. It can be seen that gods are being asked to come down and drink the Soma juice and accept the sacrificial offering, or the havis, that is poured into the fire. Clarified butter was one of the common offerings. Agni, or fire, holds a special place in sacrifices, as he is the link between man and the gods. He is referred to as the Yajaman, or master of the sacrifice, who laps up the sacrificial offering with his many mouths or flames and carries the oblations up to the god with smoke. Now notice we're not slaughtering beings here. Generally, the gods in the Rig Veda can be separated into their spheres of influence, namely heaven, air, and earth. The heaven is the domination of Dios, the sky; Varuna, the waters; Mitra, the protector of those; Surya, the sun; Thusan, and the Ashwini twins. The goddesses associated with heaven are Usas, dawn, and Ratra, or night. The gods of the air are Indra, Apam, Napat, Rudra. This name is later applied to Shiva in the Puranas. The Maruts, Vaya, Parajanya, and the ocean. Okay, tough to get through that. The deities of the earth are Prithvi, Agni, and Soma. That's earth, fire, and Soma. There are also minor gods who don't even have a single hymn addressing them entirely. Trita, or lightning form of fire, and Matra Risvan, he is said to have brought fire to mankind, so he is the Indian Prometheus, would have only snippets of hymns addressed to them. Some rivers, such as the Indus, Bias, Sutlej, are also addressed as female deities by their ancient name. There are frequent references to the river Saraswati. That's different from Saraswati, the consort of Brahma in the Puranas. The river Saravati is believed to have dried up after the Vedic period. There are also gods who are associated with abstract concepts. One of the ideas mooted is their names were originally the appellations of other gods that became independent gods in their own right with the passage of time. Dardar is a deity whose name originally belonged to Indra, but is later said to be an independent god who created the sun, the moon, and the earth. A god named Tavastar is also mentioned, who is the artisan of the gods. He is a precursor of Vishwakarma of the later texts. This association is clearly seen both Tavastar and Vishwakarma are said to have a daughter named Saranyu. The Rig Veda Saranyu is the wife of Vivasvant, possibly the sun, and is the mother of the primeval twins Yama and Yami. The Saranyu, who is the daughter of Vishwakarma, is married to Surya, the sun. In the Rig Veda, the sun is Savitir, S-A-V-I-T-R, who is associated with Surya. Okay, you remember me saying that before. And other important derived gods is... Okay, I'm going to skip that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just close this show out. So again, what happens if we don't prevail over these tyrants? I'm going to close out with some final thoughts. Again, anti-gun is anti-white. Anti-Semitism is a disease. You catch it from Jews. Free men aren't equal, and equal men aren't free. Odin demands that you grow the fuck up. Distinct peoples have a right to remain distinct. Multiracialism is not self-government. Forced association isn't freedom. 1488. And so until next time, Hell Satan. And let me get back to the studio so I can play a song to get us out of here. Okay, there we go. Come on. Go. Go.